Okay, so get this right. Picasso, the painter.
Yeah.
He once made like a vow, this promise that he'd completely quit painting if one of his sisters, she was super sick, if she recovered.
Wow.
But she didn't make it.
Oh.
And so Picasso, he went on to like dedicate his whole life to art, to painting. And he kind of believed that this commitment he'd made, right, it allowed him to make these sacrifices himself and other people, all for the sake of his art.
Yeah.
Pretty intense, huh?
It's a pretty powerful example, isn't it, of the idea that being a creative genius requires some kind of personal sacrifice, like what do they call it, a Faustian bargain?
Totally. And that idea is one of the things we're going to kind of dig into today as we dive into this book, Creating Minds.
Oh, yeah, Creating Minds.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Mad Genius Thesis. This is where we explore the lives of all these brilliant minds, these geniuses, to see if there's really like a connection between being a genius and, well, a touch of madness,
Yeah, and Creating Minds, an anatomy of creativity, that's the full title. It's a really fascinating approach. Gardner, he looks at seven super iconic figures from the 20th century.
Oh, okay.
So we have Albert Einstein, of course, and Pablo Picasso, Igor Stravinsky.
Wow, all big names.
T.S. Eliot, the poet, Martha Graham, the dancer and choreographer,
Mahatma Gandhi.
and Sigmund Freud.
Okay, so like 7 people who totally revolutionized their fields.
Right.
But also, like, we're going to see they all struggled, like, internally. And they made some pretty out there, unconventional choices just to follow their need to create, to fulfill that.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's kind of the core question that we're going to try to answer today. Is there really a link between being like a creative? Okay, so let's dive into the book. One of the first things that kind of jumped out at me was this idea that Gardner calls the 10-year rule.
Okay.
And it's this pattern that he noticed where, like, people make these big creative breakthroughs, but it's almost always after around 10 years of working really hard in their field.
Yeah, it's like they have to put in the time.
Exactly. It's like they have to, like, totally master their thing before they can really start, innovating.
It is interesting. It really is fascinating, isn't it? It's almost like there's a rhythm to creative output. Like Einstein, right? He spent years and years just immersing himself in physics, and then only then did he start publishing those groundbreaking papers about relativity.
Yeah. It's like 10 years of prep work, then bam, genius.
Yeah.
And Picasso, too. He mastered all those traditional art techniques before he, like, exploded onto the scene with Cubism.
Yeah.
But Gardner, he doesn't stop there. He introduces this idea of asynchrony.
Asynchrony?
Saying that being a little mismatched, a little out of sync, it can actually be good for coming up with totally original ideas.
Yeah, okay. It's a little counterintuitive, maybe?
Yeah.
Because usually we think about expertise, we think about mastery as the smooth process.
Right.
But Gardner is kind of suggesting that too much synchrony, like too much perfect alignment,
Yeah.
It might lead to expertise, but not really to that radical out-of-the-box thinking that really leads to those breakthroughs.
So are you saying that a little friction, just a touch of being offbeat, can, like, push someone from just being a master to, like, a genius? That's a pretty big idea.
Yeah, it is a bold statement.
Okay.
But Gardner, he has some pretty interesting examples to back it up. For example, Freud, he had this really exceptional personal intelligence, and that was pretty unusual for scientists of his time.
So he wasn't your, like, stereotypical scientist, right?
Yeah.
He was super interested in, like, human emotions, motivations, how the mind works, all that stuff.
Right, and that's what I mean. It was like a mismatch between his intelligence and the way scientists, the way everyone was thinking about science at the time.
Okay.
And that might have been a key part of how he came up with his theories about the unconscious, like really revolutionary stuff.
Okay, so a little productive misfit,
Yeah,
that can be a good thing.
it can be.
But even geniuses need support.
Right. Of course.
And Gardner, he makes it really clear that these weren't people who were just working by themselves, totally isolated. They all had, like, support systems, important ones.
Oh, totally. Yeah, he talks about how important it was to have people they were close to, close confidants who gave them support both emotionally and intellectually.
Okay.
So for Einstein, it was his friends. They called themselves the Olympiad.
Oh, wow.
They'd challenge him, get him thinking. And they provided a space where he felt comfortable exploring all his crazy ideas without being judged. Yeah, and for Picasso, it was his partnership with Georges Braque when they were developing Cubism. They really fed off of each other, pushing each other further. I imagine that kind of back and forth creatively was super important for both of them.
For sure. So these support systems, they were like totally crucial, right?
Hmm.
For testing out new ideas, refining their thinking, and honestly, just for keeping them, somewhat sane when they were doing such unusual things.
Right. Makes sense. It can be lonely to try to create something new, right? And it can be isolating.
Yeah.
So having people to bounce ideas off of, people who encourage you, but also give you constructive criticism, that can make all the difference.
Totally, totally. But let's be real for a second. There's usually a price to pay for this level of creative output, right?
Yeah.
Gardner calls them Faustian bargains. That's kind of a loaded term.
A little bit. Faustian, it implies like a deal with the devil. Yeah. Right, like you're trading, you get something incredible, but you lose something important in the process. And we see this, it plays out in a lot of these creators' lives.
Okay.
Like Stravinsky, for example. He was famous for being litigious. Like he sued a lot of people, even people he collaborated with.
Oh, wow.
It sounded like he was willing to sacrifice personal relationships just to protect his artistic vision and keep control.
Okay.
And T.S. Eliot, he lived a super ascetic life. Like he denied himself even the simplest pleasures. He really believed that self-discipline, that was the key to his creative work. It was like almost like he saw suffering as a necessary part of creating.
Right, right.
And then there's Picasso. He was known for being pretty self-serving. He could be really charming, but also ruthless when it came to pursuing his art.
So these Faustian bargains, they really show us the darker side of genius, right? Those difficult choices they made, the compromises that seem to come with being so creative.
Yeah, it really makes you think about what these people had to go through to achieve greatness, the price they paid.
Yeah, for sure. It's complex, and it brings up questions about genius and well-being. Like, can you be a creative giant without making these sacrifices?
Right.
Without being self-destructive?
Right.
It's a tough one. It seems like so many of them were driven by something inside, something that just had to be no matter the cost.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But I do wonder if their creativity could have, flourished even more in a different environment, like one that was more supportive, less demanding.
That's an interesting thought. Maybe some of their madness, let's call it that, maybe it was just a reaction to their times, you know, to the pressures to fit in, to be normal.
Right.
Maybe if they had felt more accepted, their creativity could have been channeled in a more positive way.
It makes sense. And it's important to remember that they weren't creative in every part of their lives. Like, they weren't geniuses at everything.
No, no.
Their brilliance, it was very specific to their field.
Yeah, totally. And Gardner really makes that point. He says that these individuals, they were masters of very specific symbolic systems. Like Einstein, he was amazing at visual spatial thinking.
Oh, wow.
He could manipulate these abstract concepts in his mind, like the chess player.
Okay.
And Picasso, he was a master at manipulating physical things, turning paint and canvas into these groundbreaking pieces of art.
And Stravinsky, of course, he was a genius when it came to sound, creating these incredibly complex musical compositions. It's like each one of them, they just like inherently understood the language of their field.
Right.
And they could use it in a way that that most people just couldn't even grasp.
Exactly. Their genius wasn't that they were brilliant at everything. It was that they had this amazing ability to work within a very specific area. They understood all the little details of it, and then they could push the boundaries in ways that nobody had ever thought of before.
Yeah. And it's so interesting to think about how their lives, the time they lived in, might have shaped what they created. They all lived through such huge social and cultural upheaval. The world was changing so fast around them.
Yeah. Think about World War I, the rise of all this new technology, traditional values being questioned. All of that must have had a huge impact on their work. Yeah. It's almost like they were living right on the edge of a brand new world. And their creativity was a way to make sense of everything that was changing.
Right. So maybe their creativity was a reflection of those crazy times.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was a driving force behind them. Maybe they added to the chaos. Or maybe they were reacting to it.
Yeah, that's a tough question to answer, and I don't think there is an easy answer. Sure. But it does show just how connected creativity is to everything that's happening in society and culture.
For sure. It leads us to another really important point, which is that It's important to understand how creativity works, the process itself. Gardner, he looks at all the different creative activities that these people did,
Right.
and he finds 5 different types. So you have problem solving,
Okay.
developing conceptual schemes, creating variations,
Okay.
stylized performance, and high-stakes performance.
Okay.
And he uses examples from the book to show what he means, like Einstein. He was super good at problem solving,
Oh, yeah.
like his scientific papers.
Right, but he also developed this massive conceptual scheme, right? The theory of relativity, which totally changed how we think about the universe.
Exactly. And Stravinsky, he was a master at creating variations.
Variations.
He could take these existing musical themes and transform them in like totally unexpected and new ways.
Right.
And the way Gandhi led, that can be seen as high-stakes performance.
High stakes.
Where what he did, what he said, it had huge consequences for India politically and socially.
That's true. So if we can understand these different ways that people are creative, then we can really appreciate all the different ways genius shows up. It's not just about solving equations or painting masterpieces.
Right.
It's about interacting with the world in a way that's original and that makes an impact.
And it's about pushing the boundaries of what's possible, right?
Yeah.
Challenging the way people usually think
Mm-hmm.
and creating something totally new.
Yeah. And that brings us back to the whole question of madness.
Right.
Like, is it really a necessary part of being a genius, or is it just a byproduct of the creative process? Like all the intense focus and thinking outside the box that often comes with groundbreaking work.
It's the main question we're trying to figure out in this deep dive into creating minds. And honestly, I don't think there's just a yes or no answer. There's probably a mix of things, a really complex interplay of personality, environment, and the nature of the creative process itself.
It's like asking, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Like, are these people just predisposed to certain psychological challenges?
Right.
Challenges that also happen to fuel their creativity? Or is it the pressure and the unusual lifestyle of a creative genius that makes their vulnerabilities worse?
It's probably a little of both,
Yeah.
right? It's not a simple equation. But if we understand these things, it can help us appreciate what these people went through, the challenges and triumphs,
Yeah.
and maybe even learn something about our own creative journeys.
Exactly. And one of the coolest things about Gardner's analysis is that he doesn't avoid these tough questions.
Yeah.
He dives right into the messiness of being human.
Right.
He looks at both the brilliance and the potential darkness that can come with being a creative genius.
That's what makes the book so interesting. It's not some romanticized idea of genius. It's a smart and insightful look at their lives, including the bad parts. And it makes us think critically about creativity, mental health, and how the world around us shapes our lives.
That's true. It does. One thing to remember is that Gardner's not just trying to give us a bunch of biographies.
Right. It's not just about these 7 people, right?
Yeah.
It's about trying to understand creativity itself, right? Like what makes it tick, find things they all have in common. Like are there patterns that tell us something about how creativity works?
Yeah, exactly. He wants to find those insights that go beyond these 7 examples, right? To see if there are some general conditions that help people to have creative breakthroughs.
So it's not like a how to be a genius book.
No, not at all.
Like do these 10 things and you'll be the next Einstein.
Right. No, it's more about recognizing that everyone's creative journey is different, of course. But there might be some underlying principles, like recurring themes that can tell us something about the process as a whole. It's like looking for the DNA of creativity.
Okay, I like that analogy, the DNA.
Right.
So what are some of those themes, those recurring themes? I mean, we've already talked about the 10-year rule, asynchrony support systems. What else did you see in Gardner's analysis that stood out?
Well, one thing that really hit me was this idea of domain-specific creativity. He says over and over that these people, they weren't, creative in everything. Their genius, it was limited to their specific areas of expertise.
Yeah, like Picasso wasn't going to all of a sudden figure out the secrets of the universe.
Right, exactly.
And Einstein wasn't going to write a symphony.
Yeah. And that's because their brilliance, it came from their deep understanding of a very specific area. They were masters of of their own languages, you know?
Right. So that connects back to the 10-year rule, right?
Yeah.
It takes time to really master something, to get those rules in your head and then to break free from them and do something really new.
Exactly. And, it's worth pointing out that even within their own areas, their domains, these creators, they weren't amazing at every part of what they did.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They had strengths and weaknesses like everyone else.
Oh, I like that. Tell me, give me some examples. It makes them seem more human,
Well, let's take Picasso, for example. He was a genius at, visual composition.
Yeah.
But he wasn't great at drawing the human form realistically.
Oh, right.
He'd often distort the features, the proportions to get that artistic effect.
Right. His figures are often really abstract, kind of broken up. But that's part of what makes his work so cool.
Yeah, exactly. And Stravinsky, he was a genius at using rhythm and harmony, but he wasn't really known for writing beautiful melodies, the traditional kind.
Oh.
His music could be kind of harsh and dissonant even,
Right.
but it was also totally new and exciting.
So these examples show that even within their fields, creative people can be kind of uneven, right? They have this unique set of skills and abilities.
Yeah, it's like they're trading off some skills to be amazing in others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's about finding your own niche, your own creative voice within your field.
Exactly.
And then just giving all your energy and passion to that one thing.
Exactly. And pushing the boundaries of that field, exploring what's possible.
Yeah.
Not being afraid to take risks, experiment, and even fail.
And that takes us back to that question we're looking at about creativity and mental illness. It's a tough topic, but it's one that Gardner tackles head on.
He does. He really does. He says that many of the people he studied showed signs of what we would consider mental health challenges today.
Yeah.
Like Picasso. He was known for being kind of volatile.
Right.
His emotions were all over the place.
Yeah.
And sometimes he was just cruel to people. You can't really ignore those things when you're thinking about his work.
For sure. And Stravinsky.
Yeah.
He was really private.
Yeah.
And seemed distant.
Yeah.
Even with the people he was close to. It's like he built a wall around himself to protect his creative process.
Yeah.
And Eliot struggled with depression and feeling isolated for most of his life. And you can see that in his poetry. This deep sadness and existential angst.
Yeah. And then Freud, right. He went deep into the darkest parts of the human mind.
Right.
Exploring trauma, sexuality, the unconscious. His work was revolutionary, but it also exposed him to some really disturbing things about human nature.
But we have to remember that Gardner's not saying that mental illness causes creativity.
No, definitely not.
He's not saying that you have to be mentally ill to be a genius.
No.
Or that all creative people struggle with their mental health.
No, it's way more complicated than that. And it's something we have to approach carefully. We have to understand these creators as individuals.
Right. Well,
we can't just label them,
It seems like what Gardner's getting at is that the same things that make these people brilliant, the intensity, the way they think outside the box, the way they challenge everything, those things might also make them more likely to have some mental health challenges. Like it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the fire that fuels their creativity. It can also burn them in other parts of their lives.
It's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
So if there's a link between creativity and mental fragility, how can we support these people without saying they're sick?
Yeah.
How can we help them use that fire without getting burned ourselves?
That's a good question. And I think we have to start by changing how we think.
Okay.
We have to move away from this idea of normal versus abnormal.
Yeah.
We have to see that the human mind is vast and there are so many different ways to experience the world.
Right. So instead of trying to make creative people fit into our little boxes, we need to appreciate how they see things and give them support that's specific to them.
Yeah, exactly. It's about meeting them where they are.
Right.
And helping them to thrive on their own terms.
Right. And we need to create environments where creativity is encouraged.
Absolutely.
And where people feel safe to explore their ideas without being judged.
Right. We have to celebrate the things that make them different, that weirdness,
Yeah.
Because that's usually where the really good stuff comes from.
Totally. And Gardner talks about how important it is to have supportive environments,
Yeah.
Environments that are intellectually stimulating. It's like providing fertile soil for those creative seeds to grow.
Yeah, he talks about the role of mentors,
Uh-huh.
collaborators, peers. All these people play a part in shaping how a creative person develops. These people, they don't just challenge you intellectually, they also give you emotional support and a sense of belonging. And that's key. That's how creative people thrive.
Right, right. Like Einstein had his Olympiad.
Yeah.
Picasso had Broke. Stravinsky had the Ballet Roses.
Right.
These were their people, you know?
Yeah.
People who got them, who understood their work,
Yeah.
and who pushed them to go further.
And these creators, they didn't just benefit from those relationships, they really worked at them.
Yeah.
They cultivated them because they knew they needed those connections to thrive, to stay grounded, to keep evolving.
So it's not just about having the talent, right? It's about the environment, the context where that talent can grow and blossom. It's about having people who understand you,
Yeah.
who challenge you,
Yeah.
and who encourage you to take risks and be your true creative self.
Exactly. And that's something we can all help to create, right? I mean, whether we're parents or teachers or friends or colleagues, we can all foster environments where people feel safe to express themselves creatively and to embrace their unique talents and perspectives.
We can be those mentors,
Yes.
those collaborators, the friends who give people space to be creative.
And that's a powerful thought, right? It means we can all be part of making a world where creativity is something we celebrate.
Yeah.
A world where people feel empowered to truly express themselves.
Yeah.
We can be part of that. It starts by nurturing those creative sparks in the people around us.
Yeah, I love that. It's not just about studying these incredible people. It's about taking what we learn and using it
Right.
in our own lives and making the world a better place.
Totally. By studying creativity, by seeing the patterns and the potential problems, we can create a more supportive environment for the next generation of creative thinkers and doers.
And maybe, just maybe, by doing that, we can unlock the amazing potential that's inside all of us.
That's the goal, right? To have a world where creativity is celebrated and people feel empowered to really express themselves. A world where madness in the right amount is seen as a gift, not a bad thing.
It's a beautiful thought. And it reminds me of something else Gardner says in the book. You know, it's wild to think about, right? All 7 of these people, so different fields, different personalities, but they were all shaped by the time they lived in.
Yeah.
They all grew up during this crazy period of change.
Right. Huge upheaval. It's socially, politically, even with technology.
Like they were riding this massive wave of change. Like the whole culture was shifting.
Absolutely. The 20th century, it was like all about challenging the old ways of thinking.
Yeah.
Questioning traditions. The world was changing faster than ever before.
Like the dawn of the modern world. And it seems like these creators, each in their own way, they were both reflecting those changes, but also like pushing them forward.
Yeah, totally. I mean, their work came out of that time period, but it also helped to create that time period.
Right.
Think about it, like Freud's theories about the mind.
Yeah.
Or how Einstein's theory of relativity totally changed physics.
Right, right. And Picasso with Cubism, Stravinsky with his revolutionary music.
Yeah, yeah.
Eliot in his poetry, all these fragments, they were all breaking the rules, trying new things, capturing this like feeling of a world that's constantly in motion.
It's like they were giving a voice to all the anxiety, all the uncertainty that people felt back then.
Right.
But they were also like pushing the limits of what was possible.
It wasn't just reflecting the chaos, they were actually shaping it.
Exactly.
They challenged everything, and they helped to create the world we live in now.
It really makes you think.
It's crazy to think about how their work is still affecting us today.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
a ripple effect. Their ideas still shape how we understand the world. Even 100 years later, makes you wonder, like, who are the geniuses of today?
Right.
Who's doing the groundbreaking work now that'll shape the future? Are they facing the same struggle, like those tensions between being brilliant and being unstable?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, think about it. We're living through another time of massive change, right?
Totally.
Technology, social stuff, politics. It feels like the perfect time for creative breakthroughs, but also maybe for those Faustian bargains we talked about.
Right, right. It's a tricky thing, that's for sure. And it makes it even more important to create those supportive environments for creative people. Places where they feel okay taking risks, experimenting, pushing those boundaries without without being judged or punished for it.
Totally agree. And it takes me back to what Gardner said about asynchrony.
Oh, yeah.
You know, if being a little bit of a misfit in a productive way, if that helps with innovation, then we need to like embrace the people who see things differently, the people who challenge the way things are and make us think in new ways.
Absolutely. And that
Yeah.
can be hard. You know, it means being willing to be uncomfortable,
Yeah,
questioning what we think we know, being open to different points of view, even when they challenge our own.
for sure.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into creating minds, I keep coming back to this one question. If Gardner's right about asynchrony, how can we like encourage a little bit of that productive misfit in ourselves and in our work? How can we be okay with the parts of us that don't fit in, the ideas that seem, a little out there?
That's the question, isn't it? And I think it starts with being curious, being willing to question, why things are the way they are and imagining how they could be different.
Like embracing our inner mad scientist.
Yeah, exactly. But, being aware of the risks too.
Right, finding that balance
Right.
between creative chaos and staying grounded.
Exactly. Maybe it starts with being more playful, more willing to just try things out and less afraid to mess up.
Yeah. And maybe it also means being around people who challenge us, who make us think differently, who aren't afraid to tell us when our ideas are a little crazy,
Yeah.
but also when they might be brilliant.
I love that. We need those spaces, right, where creativity can like really bloom, where it's okay to be a little mad, a little different, because that's often where the best stuff comes from.
So to all the misfits out there, to everyone who thinks differently, to all the creative rebels, keep pushing, keep exploring, keep believing in your vision.
Yes. The world needs your creativity, your originality, your willingness to challenge everything and imagine something new.
And who knows? Maybe you'll be the next one to like totally change your field.
Yeah.
And leave your mark on the world.
Thanks for joining us on the Mad Genius Thesis. We'll be back next time for another deep dive into the minds of creative giants.